Hey everyone, and welcome to Attentive Healthcare Solutions webinar. We're excited to present new PM tools for managing unapplieds, deposits, and multiple encounter visits. My name is Chelsea Grover, and I'm the Marketing Communications Coordinator for Attentive. I'd like to take a moment to explain the process for today's presentation. First, I'd like to mention that this webinar will be recorded, and we'll send a copy of the slides along with the recording within the next week. Next, for those of you who aren't familiar with Attentive, I wanted to share a bit of who we are with you. We specialize specifically in NextGen healthcare. We're good at getting data into, out of, around, and through NextGen. Basically, our goal in life is to make delighted clients by helping them get the absolute most out of their NextGen software investment. We're passionate about providing solutions for our healthcare provider partners, which in turn help them to improve patient care, enhance the patient experience, and maintain a financially healthy practice. To sum it up, we do everything NextGen. Next, I wanted to mention that we are excited to be sponsoring the NextGen Users Group meeting again this year in Orlando, Florida. We have a large team of staff going this year, both to staff our booth and to talk to you, as well as to attend sessions and learn new stuff. Get to know us and let us know if you plan on being there too. We'd love to meet up for a drink. Okay, so back to today's presentation. At the end of the presentation, we'll open the floor up to questions from you. We'll answer all the questions at the end, but you can type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel whenever they occur to you. And finally, for audio clarity purposes, everyone's phone will remain muted throughout the entire webinar. If you experience audio issues, please use the chat box to let us know so we can resolve them. And again, questions may be entered in the questions box. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce our presenters for today. Tom Seco is Attentive's Business Development Manager and a subject matter expert on the products. And Joe Schultz is the Director of Product Solutions at Attentive, which means that he and his team are the people that actually build these powerful tools and thus is in a great position to demonstrate it. Okay, so Tom, I'm gonna go ahead and pass the webinar off to you. Feel free to get started when you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much, Chelsea. So thank you everyone for attending our webinar today to learn about a couple of our tools, as Chelsea mentioned, the Unapplied Deposit Manager and the Multi-Encounter Billing Manager. Today's format is I'm going to give you a brief overview of the product and a couple slides, and I'm going to turn it over to Joe. And Joe is going to give you the demonstration of the product, and then we'll take that through to the two products. So what you'll learn today is how the product works, and you'll also get an understanding of how it can increase the efficiency of your billing staff at your practice or your health center. At the end of the two demonstrations, I'll come back and give you a brief overview of who Attentive is. So the first product we're going to talk about is the Unapplied Deposit Manager and how it can effectively and efficiently manage your unapplied balances. So what happens is, there's times when money is taken and there's no encounter for it to be applied against. There's also times when we take copays. So when copays happen, this situation happens because we're taking a copay prior to the person being seen and no encounters being created at that time. We can also take money in advance for future services, such as deposit money or maybe paying for a package of 5 or 10 visits at a time. So as I mentioned, when these transaction happens, the money gets put into the unapplied bucket. And what happens then is some practices and some health centers is someone goes into NextGen on a daily basis and manages the unapplied balances by applying that money to the encounters that have been created. Some practices may do it on a daily basis, some practices may do it on a weekly basis, some practices may do it every 10 days. And yes, there's probably some practices that do it less frequently than that. So whatever way it happens, whatever frequency it happens, it's a manual process, and the Unapplied Deposit Manager automates that process. So it can help automate the process for unapplied balances created by copays. It can help automate the process for unapplied balances that are related to deposit monies. And the Unapplied Deposit Manager gives you the ability to tag that deposit money for future services as it's intended for services and service items and modalities. You can select the particular rules that you want to apply. And how this came about is over the past 10 years, we've been working with our clients who have come to us and asked us to write some scripts for them to manage their unapplied balances. And over these 10 years, we've come across many different ways, many different business rules that the various practices and health centers wanted to manage their unapplied balances. So what we've done is we've taken all of this knowledge that we've accumulated over the years and put it into the software product. So you can select the rules that you want to apply if how you want to apply them to the unapplied balance if it equals the patient amount, or if the unapplied balance is greater than the patient amount, what rules do you want to apply? The unapplied balance is less than a patient amount, you can select what rules you want to apply and how you want it to work. If the unapplied balance equals a specific dollar amount, such as in copays, you know, a $10 copay or a $20 copay or a $50 copay, you can select how you want that to handle. You can over-apply unapplied balances, so it creates a credit balance, and you can then elect to handle it with your refund process. Some of our clients have our refund manager product, so it ties in very well with our refund manager product. If there's money left over at the encounter level, you can move it up to the account level. And so refund, or the Unapplied Deposit Manager, works both at the encounter level and the account level. So basically, to sum it up, you can use the Unapplied Deposit Manager to handle your ongoing handling of the unapplied money, or to clean up your growing unapplied balance, and also use it to manage your deposit monies. And you'll see how all of this works in the demonstration that Joe's going to take you through. So let me go ahead and turn it over to Joe, and he'll take you through the Unapplied and Deposit Manager and how it works.
All right, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Chelsea, and thank you for everyone taking some time out of the middle of your day to join us. We're going to jump in here and, as Tom said, take you through the Unapplied and Deposit Manager, how it works, what's different about it, some of the unique things that it does, and more importantly, how it can help you. About 15 years ago, I kind of started creating these tools to help you manage your practice more effectively, to provide productivity in NextGen, to automate some processes that could stand to be automated. So as Chelsea said, we're looking to give you a better experience. NextGen is great, and there's a few holes that need to be plugged occasionally, and that's where these tools fit in. We've worked with clients over the years to define and create these tools, so they're not things that we kind of came up with in a dark corner somewhere. They're tools that have real-world purpose, and hopefully they will for you too. The Unapplied and Deposit Manager is kind of a unique tool in that what you're really doing is setting up the parameters which you get to define for a job that's going to run probably nightly, but it could be weekly or monthly depending on what your needs are, but usually it would be nightly. And in order to set up this job, we give you the screen that Tom just showed you a screenshot of in the slides, which manages that. So really only 1 or 2 people would have access to this per practice. And they'd go in and pick their rules and save those rules, and then the job would go ahead and run and create batches for you to review and post the next day. So I'm not going to go into excruciating detail on all these different rules that are up here, because we just kind of went through that in the slide. But what I do want to point out is kind of in general how this is going to work for you and what it's going to help you with. So in the upper left, we have the encounter unapplied loop. So the way this is going to work is when the job runs each night, it's first going to cycle through your encounter unapplieds, and then when it finishes those, it's going to cycle through your account unapplieds. Generally, with your encounter unapplieds, you're going to try and keep those within the same encounter if you can. So it might be money for a copay that was posted to unapply that later needs to be applied. Maybe money for, basically a HSA payment into that encounter for a service that's about to be done, things like that. So we give you some rules that allow you to do the basics of unapplieds, right? If it matches the amount, if it's equal to the amount, those types of things. So if it's greater than the amount, One of the great things we allow you to do is to over apply the money and create a credit on that line item. And the reason that one's there is because we ran into clients who said, you know what, we want to keep it on the encounter. If they overpay on the encounter, we want to go ahead and issue a refund for that money because we really manage things on an encounter by encounter basis. So for those practices who do that, we allow you to take the unapplied amount, and even if it's greater than the patient amount, say, you know what, go ahead and put it out there and apply it with a credit. Otherwise, you have the option where you can apply it up to the patient amount. And then you can pick, if it doesn't match and it's less than the patient amount, do you want to apply it or not apply it? So there's nice little options like that that are kind of your basics for unapplieds, with the uniqueness of being able to over apply it with a credit. One of the other things we've seen in the past is we've had clients cleaning up copay on unapplieds, and they didn't really have the insurances set up right with all the copays, but they knew the amounts. They knew if it was $5, $20, $11, $22, they had a set of amounts that they wanted to take those. If the unapplied on the encounter matched one of those, they were going to apply it down to one of the line items and then go ahead and prune out the ones they don't want. So we have a screen where we can set those amounts. So we'd pick one of these options here that the mouse is pointing to, where if it's equal to a specific amount, we can either apply it up to the patient amount or over apply it again with that credit if you want to refund it. So when we click this, we come up with a screen where we can put in our amounts that we're looking for copays to clean up. Okay, so that's also unique to this tool, is being able to kind of set those parameters for specific amounts and force them onto the line items. And again, that's useful in helping you clean up those copays. Now, you may end up with the case that there's still money left on those encounters when you're done processing them. So you have an option of what you want to do with that. Do you want to move that money on the encounters up to the account so it can be used on other encounters in the future? So you can take the basic option to do that. Let's just go ahead and move it up to the account. Do you just want to create a task and you pick your task type on the encounter, and maybe you can pick to not move it at all and just create those tasks, and someone's going to go in the work log and review them. One of the other uniques, the third big unique about the Unapplied Deposit Manager, is the ability to do that second piece, unapplied and deposit. So what's different about the deposit mode of Unapplieds versus just having the bucket of Unapplieds is the deposits are normally intended for a specific service. So what we encourage clients to do is, if they want to use the Unapplied Deposit Manager for that, is when you take that deposit, give it a transaction code specific to the type of deposit it's for, and then we allow you to map that transaction code to various SIMs and modalities for that deposit to be drawn down against on future encounters. So we call that concept tagging. So we can basically say, you know what, let's move it up. Let's pick our tagging rules. So we're going to move it up to the account and we're going to tag it. We're going to earmark that unapplied money if it matches the criteria. What's the criteria? Well, we give you a screen to set up those mappings. So everything on the left here is the money that you're moving up. Okay, so it's either unapplied posted directly to the account or unapplied on an encounter that's being moved up to the account. And what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the various NextGen transaction codes. When you post a payment, one of the codes you pick is your transaction code, right? Like patient payment check, patient deposit, things like that. So you can set up multiple transaction codes and you give each one a name. And you go ahead and define these names. So this is a case, these last two, where we have two transaction codes and we're giving them the same name. Over here on the right, because remember, we're taking transaction codes and mapping them to future procedures. Well, let's take fertility. So if they do patient deposit fertility, we can create multiple lines on the right, all marked the same as on the left. So fertility deposit and fertility deposit. And you can define multiple modalities and or SIMs that you want to use to set those up. And you can pick if you want to do a partial application equals the same amount, apply with a credit, or if it just apply up to the patient amount. So we'll work with you during the install to set up these rules, but again, you're doing that mapping so that on future encounters, these will go ahead and get applied to those charges. So you're saving that money and you're letting the system do it instead of, just having people kind of willy-nilly saying, oh, okay, there's an unapplied, I'm going to pull that for whatever. This will be a managed way of moving those deposit monies over to future services. So on the left here then, we've set our rules for the encounter loop. So we're going to try and apply it locally within the encounter. If there's money left, we're going to try and move it up and tag it for that deposit use, that mapping. And then in the account loop, we're going to do kind of the opposite. We're going to go through the account unapplieds, and then we're first going to look at anything that's tagged if you're using that functionality. So let's say that, money was applied directly to account unapplied right in the transaction screen instead of going through an encounter. So let's grab those and tag those. Then let's start pushing it down to encounters based on the services provided, based on your SIM codes. So those SIMs and modalities. And then any of the ones that were processed through the tagging, we're going to skip the rules below. But for your general unapplieds, outside of those deposits, that type of scenario, for your general unapplieds, you can still say things like, apply to first matching patient amount, or just start with the oldest amount due and work the unapplied down moving forward. If there's money left after either of these options, then you can say, let's pile this unapplied on the newest encounter with a credit, so we can just kind of build it on that one encounter, again, if we're going to refund it. If there's none with a credit, you can say, let's go ahead and put this on the newest matching encounter. All right. So it really is powerful what you can do here. This is probably the most powerful unapplied processing tool in the NextGen space right now. And it's really the result of just, working with clients and meeting their needs on various things they've had to do over the years to resolve their unapplieds. In the middle of the screen, we have ways of scoping the rules down. Do you just want to process for specific providers or locations? These are useful if you have multiple rules running, being able to say, okay, this rule is going to run for this location, another rule is going to run for another location. Or if you're testing it and don't want to chew up all your test unapplieds, you could say, let's work with one location today, or the test unapplieds on, one provider today. So that way, if we want to tweak the rules, we haven't used up all our data. And then we have some ways on the account side to scope it down. The dollar amounts are a nice one because we have some clients that come to us and say, if it's greater than $1,000, we want to handle that manually. Or if it's less than a certain amount, again, we're going to handle it manually. So you can set on both the account loop and encounter loop which one you want. Let me go ahead and, there we go. All right, so once you've set these, you can pick if this rule is going to be active or not. Hang on. There we go. So we can pick if this rule is going to be active or not. So maybe we want it to run once because it's a kind of a cleanup rule, and then we're going to change the rule and have that one keep running nightly. Or this is the main rule that we're going to use, and it's going to continue to run nightly. And again, there's a job that would get scheduled in the database or via the BBP. It's a stored procedure that'll pick up these rules and go ahead and do that processing. And then you'd come in the next day and you'd have batches that were available for you to use. Okay, and you'd review those batches, prune out anything you don't want, and go ahead and post them. Normally, you'd let the processing run overnight, but for testing scenarios, we allow you to run a job that's up to 5 minutes using the run button here. So I'm going to go ahead and click run. Let me come back in here and reinitialize this. I hit a bad key here when I was entering in. That's my fault. So let me go ahead and save this, and then we'll go ahead and run it. So now what we're seeing down below is the transactions that were created in NextGen. Okay, if we want, we can go ahead and save this to Excel. But we're doing work in NextGen on your behalf, so we can go over here to NextGen and see our batches that were created. And again, we can open these up. We can go ahead and scroll through them, and you can pull out any transactions that you don't want in there and then go ahead and post them. So nightly, in a typical scenario, this is going to run and do all this work on your behalf. Now, for the deposits, because we're doing some work kind of on top of NextGen to do that mapping of the transaction code the payment was posted with to the services being provided, we give you a report specifically for that. Most of the other reporting, because the work happens in NextGen, you'll be able to do through your normal NextGen reports, just as if you were processing the Unapplieds manually by hand. But for the deposits for this tag set, we give you a report specific to that, where you can go ahead and pull the information and see kind of the Unapp columns here are the amounts that were basically brought in and tagged for specific use. So we can see here, it was account 84, it was pulled up from encounter 1244, and we have $15 that is in Unapplieds. Down here, we can see for account 304, the money was posted directly. Some of it was using the surgery deposit code, some of it used the other deposit, and it'll use those appropriately for the types of services that were defined. And again, this report you can save out to Excel if you want to keep a copy of it. So we give you that on top of NextGen to help you manage those deposits, and so you can kind of see the deposits being worked down over time. So that's a quick tour of the Unapplied and Deposit Manager. Again, its purpose is to help with your day-to-day unapplied processing. If unapplieds aren't a problem, chances are you may be spending labor to keep up with them, so this can simplify that. If your unapplieds are out of control, this is a great tool for getting them cleaned up. And again, if you're in a type of specialty that takes a lot of deposits, this is a great tool for automating the use of those deposits, especially if they're going to get drawn down over time. So I'll go ahead and turn it back to you, Tom.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. And so that was the Unapplied and Deposit Manager tool, and obviously you can see how it can benefit organizations, as Joe said, who manage their unapplieds on a frequent basis, a daily basis, or less frequently as well. The next product we're going to talk about is the Multiple Encounter Manager. And this product is to efficiently create multiple encounters for a single patient visit. And it is used to basically benefits organizations such as ophthalmology practices who do surgeries and dermatology centers, organizations like that that have to enter in several encounters for a single patient visit. Generally, you have to go through multiple screens in order to do this work. And what the Multiple Encounter Billing Manager does is it allows you to do that work from a single screen. So you're not moving back and forth between 2, 3, 4 different screens. You're doing it on one screen, and this saves you a significant amount of time. So let me go ahead and turn it back over to Joe, and he'll take you through a demonstration of the product.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead and jump into Billing Manager. So unlike the Unapplied and Deposit Manager, where you're setting up rules for a job that's going to run overnight, so only 1 or 2 people might have access to the application side of it, Billing Manager, you're free to roll out to a number of people within your organization that are creating those encounters. As Tom mentioned, normally it's set up for those cases where you have 1 patient visit, but you need to create several encounters. And the scenario I have set up right here is for ophthalmology, but as Tom said, dermatology, gastro, there are other specialties that have that type of scenario where they're managing their practice and their surgery center and their anesthesia all in NextGen. And this gives you one screen to create those add-on encounters without having to jump between different screens in NextGen, change practices in NextGen, and so on. So what we're seeing here is the maintenance screen where we define the encounters that we're going to create. In this case, in the ophthalmology scenario, when the patient checks in, we're going to do the professional charges. We're going to check them in to that practice. We're going to use this as the base encounter. So when they check in NextGen at the front desk, they're going to go through their normal auto flow. They're going to get the patient. They're going to create the encounter. They're going to add the insurance, so on and so forth. So that piece will still happen as you would today in NextGen. The piece where it's going to get sped up is when you have to do those add-on encounters that are related to this. You're going to be able to do it from a single screen. Now, one of the cool things about this is we're going to let you base those add-on encounters off this first encounter that's going to get created. So do we want to try and match up the insurances? For these other ones, do we want to set that it's required? So you have to have a minimum of one encounter within that practice. If we're not using the base insurance, do we want to use the last encounters insurance? Do we want to transpose the rendering from the base encounter to be the referring on another encounter? Those types of things. So you can basically set your rules here. And again, I kind of will work with you during the install to set up the initial rules. Then we can tweak and add to them as you need to accomplish what you need to accomplish in your practice. So key takeaway here is that this is configurable. If there's several encounters you need to create, but let's say you don't do anesthesia, well, we can build out this screen without the anesthesia. So you tell us what encounters you need to create, and then we'll do that. Now, normally, you'd know the encounter that you're working with. You might have a report that you're working off of patients that came in, and you have to enter the other ones. If you do need to look it up by name, we give you a screen where you can go ahead and enter, last name, first name, date of birth, things like that, and then pull up the encounter number and transfer it over here. But where you start is we have, again, our base encounter from check-in, which in this scenario is the professional charges, so it's on the practice side. And then we need to create several more encounters, which could be in the same practice, they could be in other practices, depending on how you're managing your environment. So you can drive this just like NextGen with your right mouse menu. If you don't want to take your hands off the keyboard to work the mouse, down at the bottom here, we have a set of accelerators. So key combinations that'll get you to those functions quicker. So you can say, you know what, let's go ahead and add a new ASC encounter. It brought down our rendering over here to be the referring on this one. So we can go ahead and pick a provider out of our provider list. I can do that accelerator key to get to the SIM code lookup. And then we can go ahead and, punch in a whole SIM or a partial SIM and pull that back, and it'll pull back the SIM, the price, the modifiers, and so on. Now, if we say, okay, that one's good, and we want to go enter the anesthesia charge, I can do that accelerated key, do a Control-4, and it just put our anesthesia charge down here. We can look up our provider here, pull that back. And we've even built in logic to do the anesthesia calculations. So for this particular code, it saw that it's an anesthesia code. If I click down here, we'll see the header highlights for anesthesia. You can put in your start time and your stop time. And then if there's a base unit defined on that code, it'll pull that out. It'll do the unit calculation based on the rounding you've set for the insurance, and bring that amount up basically to the charge, right? To the amount of the charge. So in this screen, I had my one encounter that was created from check-in. I just created 2 more encounters with charges. You can add multiple charges if you want. Everything in here right now, aside from the base encounter, is just in memory. We haven't written it to NextGen, so if you decide that there's something you want to change or pull out of here before it's written in NextGen, you can do that. But when you're done, you just go ahead and click the Save button, and now it'll create those encounters, it'll create those charges. If you're going between practices and the person is not yet a patient in the other practice, it'll create the chart, so they'll be a patient in the other practice. It'll do its best based on how you have insurances set up to map the insurances in the other practice. It's doing all that for you behind the scenes in creating those. So I can do a find on this again, and now I can see my other encounters that were set up, and we can actually jump into one of these other practices. So we'll go to the surgery center and pick encounter 31. So let me switch practices. And again, these can be in the same practice, multiple encounters, or in different practices, however you want to set them up. And then we'll pull up the chart. So like I said, it'll create the chart if they're not already in there. And then here's our charge, here's our encounter. All that got moved over for us just by using that single screen. So this tool, again, it's really intended for scenarios where you have an initial encounter and there's several follow-on encounters that need to be created for that at the same time, several related ones. It gives you a single screen to manage all this, and what we've done is just kind of in a grid format, giving you all the relevant fields for those encounters and charges, and automated the moving of the data like insurances and stuff behind the scenes. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Tom now.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So we just saw, two of our products that increase the efficiency and effectiveness of the billing staffs. So what I'm going to do now is just take a minute and tell you a little bit about iTentive, and then after that, then what we'll do is open it up to questions. So a little bit about iTentive. We were founded in 2003. We have 20 years experience with NextGen. We have over 40 employees in the company, most of which are consultants that travel from practice to practice, health center to health center, working with the organizations to improve workflows, improve business process, improve reporting, so that you can get as much value out of NextGen as possible. If you take 2003 and 20 years, they do not add up, and the reason for that is iTentive started out as the IT department for a medical organization, and back in the late 90s and early 2000s, when the business mantra back then was focus on what you do best and outsource the rest, the medical organization was going to outsource the IT group. And the leaders of the IT group said, well, if you want to do that, what we'd like to do is form our own company and provide services back to you. So they agreed to do that. And from that point forward, we have worked with over 350 to 400 clients that use NextGen, and we've become a strategic partner with NextGen as well. We do generate our revenue through 5 service lines, and through those 5 service lines, we provide solutions such as, like I mentioned earlier, workflow improvement, business process improvement, revenue cycle consulting. So if you have any types of issues, or if you want to, think your process is as efficient as it should be, we can come in and do an assessment and talk to you about ways to improve each of those situations. We can do compliance consulting, where we can help you ensure compliance with regulations. We can do, we have a group of people that can perform optimizations, performance optimizations, such as maybe your NextGen system or modules. Some of them aren't working or responding as quickly as you would like. Maybe there are some parameters that we can tweak to have it improve performance. Sometimes it's not, performance isn't related to NextGen. Maybe it's related to your system, to your computers, your servers, your local area network, things like that. We can do an optimization of that as well. So both at the application level and at the system architecture level. We do have a group of developers that can provide customizations to your templates. Sometimes organizations need to have templates customized to suit their needs. Same thing with reporting. Sometimes there's not the specific report that you need or would like to have to help run your practice. We can create custom reports with some of our developers. We do have a group of developers, as we mentioned earlier, that develop the productivity tools, of which we just talked about 2 of them today, the Unapplied Deposit Manager and Billing Manager, but we also have Refund Manager and Chart Guard and all these other tools that we've developed internally. We do provide hosting and IT managed services as well. So if you need us to or would like us to manage your IT infrastructure, your laptops, your desktops, your printers, your servers, we can do that through our IT managed services group. We also, as I mentioned, have a data center, so we can host organizations as well. So if you are interested in hosting, we can provide that type of service for you as well. We can provide support, both your IT help desk support, if you will, to take calls about your infrastructure, but we can also, in some cases, do NextGen support as well. We are an authorized reseller for NextGen, so we can sell NextGen products. So that's a little bit about us and who we are. The next steps are, if any of these 2 products, if you have an interest in talking in more depth about them, give me a call or send me an email, or give Joe a call, send him an email, and we can talk through it with you, or even do another demonstration for you more in depth and allow you to answer questions as they specifically pertain to your organization. So what we'll do now is turn it over back to Chelsea, and we can take any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you, Joe. Again, thank you everyone for joining us. If you have questions, you can type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel. We only have 2, so we're going to have plenty of time to get through them. Feel free to type them, and we'll just answer them in the order that we've received them. First question, we use NextGen in a hosted environment. Can we still use this tool?
Absolutely. Both tools are written in the same technologies as NextGen, Microsoft Visual Studio, and they can be run locally on PCs or up on hosted Windows, like terminal servers, Citrix servers, things along those lines.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Next question. We have an enterprise account set up with different practices using different tax IDs and bank accounts. Will this work with managing credits and unapplied across different practices?
For the person who asked it, as you know, that's kind of a complex scenario. So it can work in conjunction with Refund Manager, which can distribute credits between practices within the same NextGen database. So we could basically have it move the money to line items and then move those line item credits around between different practices. If you did have a need for doing this strictly with Unapplieds, let us know, because we're always looking for new features that we can add to the tools. As we mentioned during the demo, a lot of these things that make it into the tools are from problems you're experiencing out in the real world.
So it sounds like maybe that's a better one to talk more about offline, Joe?
Absolutely.
Great. And it looks like we got another question that came in. We already have Refund Manager. How does this work with that?
Okay, as I was kind of mentioning, it's very complementary to Refund Manager. So Refund Manager is handling your line item credits, which need to be either refunded or moved around between charges and encounters. So if you think of Refund Manager as working with the line item credits, this is working with your unapplied credits, whether they're true unapplieds or really deposits that you're holding. So long as they're in the unapplied buckets, that's where this tool fits in. So they're very much sister tools.
So if I could just add to that, what happens is, as you saw in one of the options, you can over apply the unapplied to the encounter and create a credit balance. And then once that credit balance is created there, you can use Refund Manager to go through the refund process, or as Joe mentioned, applying that credit to other encounters.
Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for that clarification. And it looks like that's all the questions we have today. So we're ending a little bit early today. I'm sure that you can find something to do with your extra minutes back into your day. If you have further questions, though, you see both Tom and Joe's information up on the screen. Feel free to reach out to them. Otherwise, you can always reply back to the email that I'll be sending with a link to the slides and recording, and you can ask me, and I'll make sure that it gets to the right hands. Basically, any way you can get a hold of us, we're happy to help. We look forward to hopefully hearing from you. And in the meantime, have a great day, and we hope to see you at UGM.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.